My name is Carolyn Walker. I'm 62, a retired schoolteacher, and I've been a widow for 7 years. These days, I live alone in a modest home, one built from decades of memories, many centered around raising my only son, David. Just a few months ago, I gave David and his wife, Melanie, a house, paid in full, no mortgage, no strings. It was the culmination of a lifetime of saving, a gift of love. I told myself. I picked out the paint, built the furniture in my garage, even sewed the curtains by hand. It wasn't just a house, it was a piece of me. So when David texted me that morning, my hands began to tremble in a way they hadn't since the day we buried his father. The message was short. You won't be joining us on the family cruise. Melanie wants to keep it just family. Just family. And suddenly, I wasn't part of that. I sat in my kitchen, coffee growing cold beside me, staring at those words. My fingers, stiff with disbelief, typed a single reply, okay. That one word carried every unspoken feeling, hurt, confusion, betrayal. I hit send, but inside, a voice screamed. So I was good enough to buy your home, but not good enough to sit at your dinner table? Not good enough for your vacation photos? My heart thundered, but my face remained composed, numb, detached. And right then, something inside me snapped. The part of me that made excuses, that stayed quiet to keep the peace, that part died. The morning light crept across the floor, touching the kitchen chairs I'd refinished by hand, the same chairs David used to sit in, knees scraped and full of wild questions about the stars. That little boy was gone, and in his place stood a man who'd drawn a line, one I was no longer allowed to cross. The house felt unfamiliar now, like a museum of misjudged generosity. On the walls hung smiling photos from family trips I'd paid for, Disneyland when David was 7, Cancun, Melanie's first trip with us, a snowy cabin that Christmas, another gift they couldn't afford. I used to call them my gifts, but now, all I saw were receipts framed in guilt. I thought back to their housewarming party last spring, the one I organized, funded, and cleaned up afterward. I could still hear Melanie's voice, warm and tearful as she held my hands. Carolyn, you didn't have to do this. You'll always have a room here, you know that. And I believed her, because mothers believe, we want to believe. I remembered painting their bedroom in lavender, Melanie's favorite, installing new curtains while they were at work. Every item in that house had my fingerprints, every lamp, every throw pillow, every little detail. I kept myself busy to avoid facing a quieter truth. They rarely visited, seldom called, and I convinced myself they were just busy, young couples adjusting to life. But that wasn't it. The truth was heavier than any box I'd ever packed. They had stopped seeing me as a person. I was the fixer, the helper, the bank account, and when the money ran out, so did their attention. I had given too much, and in return, they quietly erased me. The next morning, the silence in my home felt suffocating, not peaceful, but pressing, like grief wrapped in quiet. I called Nancy. She was at my door within the hour. No questions, no small talk, just presence, the kind only old friends understand. She looked at my face and didn't need to ask. Tell me, she said softly, setting her purse aside. I slid my phone across the table. She read the message, her expression hardening. They've been planning this, Carolyn. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe it's just Melanie, maybe she got in his head. David's not like this. Nancy reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with the kind of honesty only decades of friendship can bring. You raised a kind boy, she said gently, but you also raised one who never had to struggle. Melanie saw that, and she saw how to shape him. I turned away. You made yourself small, Carolyn, and now they've decided that's where you belong. It stung, because it was true. I'd stayed useful so long, I'd forgotten how to be visible. But something inside me was shifting. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Nancy's words echoing in my mind. They've been planning this. At 2:17 a.m., I got up, walked into the kitchen, sat down at the table. The laptop screen cast a quiet glow across the room as I opened it. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. And for the first time in a long time, I was no longer writing excuses. For years, Melanie had managed most of my online accounts. It's just easier, she'd say in that syrupy, patient tone. You shouldn't have to worry about these things in retirement. And I believed her. I wanted to believe she was helping, that I still mattered. But that night, I logged in with new eyes. At first glance, everything looked fine, checking, savings, retirement, all intact, no red flags. But danger doesn't wave, it whispers, it hides behind the ordinary. So I looked closer. There they were, multiple transfers, small amounts, spread out, vague labels, property maintenance, emergency fund, home repair, but I hadn't authorized any home repairs, I hadn't approved any new accounts. I traced the transactions to unfamiliar accounts. They weren't in my name. They were in Melanie's. Somehow, she'd added herself as a secondary user, quietly, methodically, as if she knew I wouldn't look. She had been siphoning money for months, maybe years, not in chunks, but in drips, just enough to stay invisible. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft. And David, was he unaware, or just complicit? As long as the money kept flowing, did he even care? I sat back, heart pounding, not with fear, but something colder, sharper. Clarity. They weren't planning to hurt me someday. They already were. And they thought I'd never notice. But I had. And I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. By morning, my decision was made. No more silence, no more waiting for the next betrayal. I called Mr. Harris, my attorney. He'd handled my affairs for decades, my will, my retirement, even the transfer of the house to David and Melanie. He picked up right away. Mrs. Walker, good to hear from you. Everything all right? No, I said calmly, and that's why I need to see you, today. He cleared his schedule. Within hours, I sat across from him in his quiet office, hands folded neatly in my lap. I want to reverse the house transfer, I said, freeze every account, cancel every power of attorney. He blinked, slowly nodded. This will likely cause friction. They already caused it, I replied, I just finally noticed. He didn't argue, he understood. If there's suspected financial abuse, we'll need documentation, detailed records. I have some, I said, sliding a printed spreadsheet across the desk, and I want more. He studied me for a moment. Would you consider hiring a private investigator? I didn't hesitate. Hire whoever you trust. He nodded, more resolute now. Then we move fast. I'll begin the filings. The investigator will build a full record. When I stepped out of his office, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about stopping them. It was about reclaiming myself, quietly, precisely, with the kind of strength they never imagined I still had. That afternoon, sunlight streamed into my kitchen, warming the wood floor. I sat at the table, breathing evenly. For the first time in weeks, my hands didn't shake. They thought I would stay quiet. That I would sign whatever they placed in front of me. That the woman they could manipulate was still here. She wasn't. And the woman who'd taken her place? She wasn't afraid to burn bridges that led nowhere. The next morning, I found an envelope beneath my front door. White, plain, familiar. Melanie always used those when she organized my paperwork. On top, a yellow sticky note in her looping, practiced handwriting. Just sign whenever you're ready, Mom. It'll make everything easier while we're away. No knock, no visit, just the envelope, slid beneath my door like a landlord issuing an eviction. They were already gone, off on a cruise, smiling for the camera, sipping tropical cocktails, and here I was, staring at a quiet trap left behind. I opened it. The documents inside were polished, legal, formal, neat. At first glance, they appeared routine, estate planning updates, household authorizations. But tucked in the middle, disguised beneath legal jargon, was the real intention. Permanent power of attorney. Irrevocable. It would give Melanie total control, not just over my finances, but my medical decisions, my property, even the right to place me in a care facility, with or without my consent. They weren't waiting for me to decline. They were preparing to take everything while I was still alive. This wasn't about inheritance. It was about control. I stared at the papers, then slowly, methodically, placed them back in the envelope. No tears, no panic. Just steel. They had no idea who they were trying to erase. I stood still, one hand on the counter, letting the weight of it all sink in. Then, in the hush of the kitchen, I whispered to no one, or maybe to the woman I used to be, "You almost signed it." Almost. But not today. Because today, I saw it clearly. Not a routine document. A weapon. And I wouldn't surrender it, I'd use it. As evidence. As leverage. Because they thought they were 2 steps ahead. But I had caught up. And the tide had already started to turn. By noon, I was back in Mr. Harris's office. No small talk this time. He saw the look in my eyes and simply nodded. They tried to slide this under my door before their cruise, I said, placing the envelope on his desk. He opened it slowly, reading the fine print in silence. Then he exhaled, sharp and low. This isn't just manipulative, it's predatory. If I'd signed it, I said, they could have emptied my accounts, sold my house, and stuck me in a care home, with a smile on their faces. He studied me, searching for panic, but there was none. Let's move faster, I said. Something shifted in him, concern turning to respect. We already began. The house deed reversal is filed, the asset freeze is underway, the investigator has traced several questionable transfers, but after this, he tapped the envelope. We escalate. Everything gets locked. No one touches a cent without your signature. I nodded once. And we're adding a protective clause, he continued. If they push back legally, we'll present a full timeline of coercion. It won't be a fight, they'll be unmasked. I leaned back in the chair. My breath was steady. My shoulders light. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I was rebuilding, and this time, for myself. That afternoon, my home looked the same, but everything had changed. Because I had changed. The woman who once bought affection had been replaced by someone who no longer mistook love for obedience. By someone who understood that peace isn't granted. It's protected. And I was finally protecting mine. 4 days later, their cruise ship docked. I was already waiting. I parked a block away and watched as they returned, sun-kissed, carefree, their luggage spilling from the SUV. Melanie stepped out first, barking about mortgage paperwork. David followed, eyes glued to his phone, detached, as always. Then they saw the house. And froze. A moving van sat in the driveway. 2 unfamiliar cars. A young couple laughing with a realtor. Boxes stacked neatly by the porch. It took a moment for recognition to register. Mom? David's voice cracked with confusion. Melanie's eyes narrowed. What's going on? Who are these people? I stepped out from across the street, calm and composed. You won't need to manage anything for me anymore. Melanie's tone sharpened. What does that mean? David looked around, panicked. Why are people in our house? It's not your house, I said, not anymore. Melanie stormed forward. You can't do this, we're refinancing, we have contracts. I opened my bag and handed David a folder. These are the only contracts that matter now. He flipped through the pages, his hands trembling. House reversal. Sale documentation. A full financial audit. Copies of unauthorized transfers. Melanie ripped the folder from him, scanning the documents, her face blanching. She looked up, angry, exposed. None of this will hold up. We were helping you. You'll regret this. I met her eyes. You mean draining my accounts while calling it help? Filing for power of attorney behind my back? Using my home as collateral without a word? David tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper. We didn't mean. I raised a hand. No, you didn't mean to get caught. Silence. The kind that strips everything bare. I pulled out a second folder. Held it out to Melanie. Inside, legal records. Every forged signature. Every unauthorized login. A paper trail of quiet betrayal. If you take this to court, I said, voice even. This all becomes public. They stood frozen, pale. I looked at David, my son, and said my last words to him. I was your mother. You made me your mark. Then I turned. And walked away. I drove home slow, letting the silence settle. The sun dipped low behind the rooftops. My new apartment was simple. No designer furniture. No view. But it was mine. I set my phone on the table, screen down. Ignored David's final message, one last plea, wrapped in guilt. I had nothing left to give. And in that stillness, something new arrived. Freedom. They thought I would fall apart without them. But the truth was, I had been buried beneath them for too long. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means listening. And now? I speak only for me.